Welcome to another edition of the SprintCarLimited.com Deep Dive, this week presented by Dottie's Family Market in Dover, PA. Joining us on the show is BAPS Motor Speedway announcer Dave Hare. Before we get to Dave, don't forget to check out Dottie's Family Market at the corner of Canal Road and Bull Road in Dover, PA. Dottie's is a one-stop shop for everything you need to go tailgating at the races. Dottie's has a great selection of grab-and-go meals and the best hand-cut meats, cheeses for grilling, and tons of local goodies to choose from. Don't forget to fill up on some of the non-ethanol gasoline for improved mileage and better performance. If you have a little time to kill before the races, stop by the Hive Coffee House and Cafe to grab some coffee and lunch before heading out to your favorite racetrack. Now here's Dave. Dave, welcome to the Deep Dive.
Hey, Jeremy. Thank you, bud.
We had some technical issues, but we got it. We're good. We're good to go. And doing my research a little bit on you, I don't want to say you're obscure, but a lot of people don't know a lot about your background. They know you obviously from BAPS Motor Speedway. You're now the second at Williams Grove, an EMMR, obviously. So, Dave, first thing is, when did you first get exposed to racing? Was it as a kid? Is this something that's been a big part of your life?
Yeah. So my parents went to Lincoln Speedway, and I think they had me there when I was like nine months old.
Oh,
So that was 1965. So yeah, was exposed to it at an early age, and just enjoyed it early on. I was a late model kid. Big Slim Devil This at Lincoln Speedway was my guy, and that Ford Galaxy number 400. And eventually, I came around to the wing side of things, and as the sprint cars evolved in central Pennsylvania. And as a kid, I remember like when Bobby Allen was showing up, and Steve Smith, and Kenny Weld, and Jan Opperman, Jay Myers, and yeah, so a lot of the guys that we look back today and think, wow, those guys were something special. I remember them from when I was a kid. Yeah.
is it something that, I mean, obviously you grow up, you become a teenager, and then you go off to school or whatever and work and whatnot.
Hmm.
Is it something that you continued to hold an interest in and continued to attend throughout the years?
Um, on and off. I mean, through school, my buddies and I in high school, we'd go to Lincoln. Once we got our license, and we'd head up to Williams Grove on occasion. My dad he took us up to Reading to see the modifieds and the Daniel Boone 200. And we'd go up to Reading once or twice a year. Um, I went off to college. I went to Salisbury University. It was Salisbury State College, then on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I went to a couple races down there at what was US 13, which is now Delaware International.
Yep.
Um, but I sort of got away from it at that point. I got married early. I was 20. Not sure what I was thinking, but it happened. Had two children by the time I was 23, and so that was my life. And I was wrapped up in the family thing, and didn't have a lot of extra money, and so we weren't going to the races. I think 1988, I got back into it for a little while. Was up at Lincoln for most of the season, and then my son was born, second child, and so that took up more time. So just sort of stepped away from it for a while, but in and out until. Ooh, I guess so. 2000, I was up at the Grove for the opener, um, and that's when Casey won. Casey won the
Yep.
opener up at the Grove, and that day Bruce Ellis mentioned over the PA that Wayne Harper and Bill Meyer were doing this program called Thunder at the Grove, and I graduated from college, 86. Did a lot of radio and TV stuff in college, but never followed up on it. Felt like I had some unfinished business. I went back to broadcasting school. I was doing some internships at that point, and I'm like, well, that's my gig. How do I get in on this? If I could combine radio and sprint car racing, that'd be awesome. So it was being broadcast over the Liberty Works radio network, which was housed in Westminster, Maryland, right down the road. And so I got in touch with them and became the producer for the program in the studio. So I had a whole year of listening to Wayne and Bill Meyer. So I was familiar with the cadence and when Wayne would talk and when he was going to stop, when he was transitioning, that type of thing. And then the next year, Mike Martin, who was head of the SCN Radio, Sprint Car Network, he got a contract, signed a contract with TNN, and to have the radio and internet broadcast rights for the World of Outlaws. And so he said, we're taking this show on the road. Now, Wayne and Bill had gone to Knoxville in 2000, and I was in the studio doing all the work from the studio. But the next year, he said, we're going out on the road. So I went out on the road with the Sprint Car Network and was doing the production work, doing color. Wayne did most of the lead for the races. Bobby Gerald came out, worked with him, Ralph Shaheen, and great time. I was cutting commercials for our sponsors on a laptop in hotel rooms and doing all the editing on what then was Cool Edit Pro. And so, yeah, we did a lot of traveling, saw a lot of racing, met a lot of good people. And then, unfortunately, it was a situation where the financial commitment was not being met. So I said, well, if I'm going to bang my head against the wall, I can do it at home because I had a wife and 2 children. When you go out on the road, you're gone for weeks at a time. And so I came home and just stepped away from things for a while until 2009. And to tell you, Jeremy, just how far out of things I was, Alan Kreitzer called me. Now, I knew Alan's name, but I didn't know who he was. Oh. So what does that tell you? Yeah, exactly. And he said, we've got this Saturday night series at Williams Grove Speedway, which is the super sportsmen and the late models and street stocks, the exiles from Silver Spring Speedway. And he said, we need an announcer. And Wayne Harper says, you're the guy for the job. So I'm like, sure, why not? I was at a point where I could do it. So I knew nothing. I knew none of the drivers. But that's when I got into actually track announcing. And, I've been with that series. This is my 16th season now. So, it's been a good ride. Meet so many great people.
So when you're out on the road like that, granted you had a family at home, but it's great. Like you said, you're meeting people and you're doing what you love. How important, and you were doing color, you said, how important was that for you developing a style? Or is that something that kind of took until you got the gig at Williams Grove in 2009 with the Saturday night series?
No, I think, in part that helped build the style. But, as a kid, again, I remember every Sunday, my dad had this black portable Zenith radio, and whatever he was doing outside, it was turned on to FM 93 WPOC out of Baltimore, and they carried MRN radio. And so from the time I was a kid, I was listening to NASCAR broadcasts on the radio. And this is before Daytona made its way to television. So, I was listening to Barney Hall and Eli Gold and Mike Joy and those guys. So that soundtrack was sort of always playing in my mind. And then, people have asked me, do you have somebody that's your your idol, your idol in broadcasting? And as much as I love motorsports, that guy has always been Vin Scully. And Vin is someone who would sort of bring you alongside for the game. If he's calling a Dodgers game, or if he was calling a Dodgers game, rather, you felt like you were there, you were sitting with Vin, and he was walking you through the game and at the same time introducing you to the players. Right. So that's sort of been one of my goals is when announcing, to put a face on the car, to make the racers real, because, it's a little easier now, I think, with social media being what it is and drivers being pretty accessible. But it's also easy for folks to sit up in the stand, see the car, see the driver, maybe trackside in his driving suit, but not know a whole lot about the person beyond that. And so I try and make that connection between the driver and the folks in the stands.
I always, when people point to, guys you like listening to, I know for me, it's Al Michaels.
Yeah,
You know, uh, I know a lot of people like Vin Scully. I mean, he's an
yeah.
iconic announcer. Bob Costas, although I guess he's fallen out of favor a little bit now because he's pretty opinionated. But
Mm.
what how long does it take you to get comfortable behind the mic? Is it something that you kind of embraced right away, or is it just a constant? Now, I know for style, you're always tweaking and stuff, but to
Yeah.
get comfortable, to find your voice, how long does that take?
Hmm. I think for me, life's all about relationships, and that I think translates in announcing as well. So it's a matter of spending time in the pits, getting to know the drivers, the teams, um, and then being able to sort of off the cuff as things flow throughout the course of the night, be able to share some stories and work it in to the show in a way that's comfortable and doesn't sound forced. Am I successful at that on, every time, every night? No. But I think it's all about the relationship piece. And after that, I think, things begin to flow because if you know the people that you're um, that you're covering on any given night, it makes it so much easier to share a story and to fill time when you need to. If there's an extended yellow, that type of thing, to tell a story about the driver, which may or may not be related to that night, may or may not be related to racing, but again, helps draw the fan a little bit closer to the driver, to the sport.
I know you're in the pit area a lot. And I think that's, I've had Johnny Gibson on this show. I've had Chase Rodman on the show,
Hmm.
Tony Laporta,
Yep.
and, Brian Holbert. So
Yeah.
all these, I think one of the things that goes unnoticed to the fans or people who are listening at home, whether it's pay-per-view or at
Yeah.
the track, how much work goes into it. You guys just don't show up, start talking, and leave. You're in the pit area a lot. And I think and I know I've seen your note sheet.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah. Yeah.
lot. You actually have a book.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have a binder with rosters in, but I also carry a legal pad when I'm in the pit area, and get some notes and some stories, that type of thing. But I think I'm a big Henry Ford guy. There's something to be learned from everyone, but Henry Ford infamously said, "Above all else, the key to success is preparation." Um, Fear of failure is a great a great motivator. And so, there are times even just for a regular weekly show at BAPS, and it might not even be sprint cars. It could be our sportsman, extreme stocks, whatever. It's not unusual to put in uh, 2 4 hours worth of prep work during the week, updating points, getting notes, going through Facebook to look for updates and stories. And this driver's got a new sponsor. This guy was on vacation last week. Here's where he went. Here's what he did. This driver has a daughter that just graduated. She's all state soccer, whatever. If the information's out there, I think if there's a good story to be told, I think we're obligated to tell it and support the racers in that way, that manner.
So you end up you're at Williams Grove with Saturday Night Series. It then moves to BAPS Motor Speedway, I believe 2016, if I'm not
16. Yeah.
2016.
Yep.
And you move over there. It was an easy transition. That's when I was
Yeah.
exposed to you the most
Yeah.
because I was covering sprint cars for so long.
Sure.
How hard is it to transition? Okay, you're doing the trio. You're doing sportsman, late
Yep.
models, street stocks / extreme stocks, whatever.
Yeah.
How difficult is it to make the transition to now you go to BAPS and you're doing those core divisions? But Colton likes to throw you some curveballs. You have some legends. You have
Yeah.
410 sprint car shows. It's really kind of a mixed bag at BAPS. How
Yep.
difficult is it to handle those other divisions then? Because you don't just pass it off to someone else.
No, it could be it could be a challenge. There are years when we might have over the course of a season 14 or 15 different divisions come through. And, so I try and maintain rosters for most of them, um, and share sponsorship information whenever possible. It's not always possible on any given night when you have 4 or 5 divisions and the show is moving along pretty quickly. But it's a challenge. It's when you come across a group of drivers that are willing to talk, that makes it so much easier. Sometimes some of the guys in the sprint car ranks maybe aren't, and I think it's possibly because they're always the spotlight in central Pennsylvania is always on them, and after a
Mm.
while that wears you down, I'm sure. So some of the guys aren't as willing to talk as guys in maybe the support ranks are. They're a little bit more eager, but I think one of the ways I've been able to work through that scenario is if there's a race at Williams Grove, there's a race at Lincoln, and I'm off and I'm in the pits, I stop by before the show and, I'm talking to the drivers or some of the crew members, just chatting it up about whatever. And then so when they come to BAPS, I've already got that relationship established and they're more willing to take time to talk. And, I try to read the environment as well, because if there's something going on, they're hustling to get the car ready, or I know that they've had a bad night the night before, something happened, if there's a conflict between 2 drivers or whatever, I want to be sensitive to that and get out of the way, because they don't want me or anybody else in there at that point. So, but yeah, again, it comes back to relationships, making it happen.
How do you feel about the two-man booth? I've talked to a bunch of guys before. I know sometimes you have not done it at BAPS when, say, a traveling series or come in. Other guys like it.
Yeah.
Where do you come out on that?
Well, when we have a traveling series come to BAPS, my position is that's that's the other announcer's series. So I step aside, and I have no problem with that. I've worked with people in the past. Of course, with the Sprint Car Network, SCN Radio, it was always
Yep.
2 of us on the mic. Worked with Pat Sullivan several years ago at BAPS when he came through with USAC, loved it. I also worked with some folks when I was the announcer for Appalachian Dirt Late Model Speed Week for several years, and would go to some different tracks or throughout the region and would work with the home announcer and enjoyed it. It's easier to do it yourself.
Yep. That's what I was going to ask. Is it easier? Because I know when I'm talking to Ryan Hand on our podcast,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier than doing the 90 at 9.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I find it easier just to do it myself.
Oh,
And I don't know if Johnny, he probably feels the same way. I think I talked to him about it when he's been at BAPS, and I think John, if he's comfortable with somebody, he likes to have that support in the booth. But generally, if you're doing it yourself, you don't have to worry about stepping on one another. You can sort of steer the direction of the show, that type of thing. But yeah, when folks come to BAPS, I'd step aside, get out of the way. The other thing is, Jeremy, you've been up in the booth there where the
yes.
announcer is. You'd be basically on top of one another to be able to announce as a duo. But yeah, that's sort of where I am with things.
The streaming. Okay. We've
Yeah.
thrown some curveballs at announcers now. You have
Yeah.
streaming, it's become a bigger part of the sport. How difficult, because you're so used to doing everything for the audience in front of you at the track, but
Yep.
now you're adding this other component. Has that made it tricky kind of for announcers, do you think, where you're almost, it's just two different audiences and you kind of got to figure out what style you want to use?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. At BAPS, we have that Jumbotron in the infield, which
Mhm.
makes it nice when, Sprint Car Unlimited.tv is there. I have that right in front of me, which is helpful. And Mike Mallett's right behind me, producing, and he'll clue me in on some things, and or we communicate. If there's a caution, or it's maybe even the beginning of a heat race, and the cars are just circling the track and we need to fill the time, I'll tell Mallett, hey, can you ask the camera guy to zoom in on Anthony Macri, and then we'll tell a story about Anthony Macri, that type of thing. So um, if with the streaming, if there's a jumbotron at the speedway, I think it makes it easier for everyone, because then the fans sitting in the stands can also follow along with that little story, and they're watching Anthony on the track on the big screen a lot of times too. So, but yeah, I mean, you have to keep in mind that the folks at the track are front and center, and you can't leave them out. But at the same time, I think it's important to so, for instance, Jeremy, when you do your pay-per-views, and we've got the American Dream, Rusty Rhodes, headed to
Rusty
the pit
Rhodes.
area. He does great work back there, right?
Mhm.
And some fantastic shots of the cars and the crews behind the scene in between races. And if that shows up on the screen and you're sitting at home watching, but I'm talking about something completely different, that's not a good translation. It's not a good look. So, I think it's important to be alert to those types of opportunities to really not only draw the viewer in, but again, if there is a big screen at the track, that's an opportunity for the fans at the track to get a little good look at what's happening behind the scenes as well.
I know when I'm doing the producing part of the show, I love doing BAPS because
Mhm.
it's easy. Plus, there are some announcers who don't care for pay-per-view, don't care for streaming, and they really don't want to deal with it. So they
Yeah.
just kind of do their thing. I know one of the things you do very well is always back and forth. I know you've done it with Mallet, you've done it with me, of trying to kind of meld them together a little bit.
Hmm.
And no, I think you do a great job with that.
I appreciate it. It's fun.
EMMR, Eastern
Yeah.
Museum of Motor Racing. When did
Yeah.
you get involved with that? Because you're heavily involved there now. You guys do a lot of interviews, Sunday stuff. What is your role there, and when did you get involved with the museum?
Yeah. I got involved, I'm going to say, shortly after starting up at Williams Grove in 2009. And of course, Lynn Paxton, the driving force of the Eastern Museum of Motor Racing, got introduced to him, found out I was an announcer. He said, hey, we could use some help with some roundtables. And this was in the early days of the roundtables up there. And so I think one of my first interviews on a panel, I think it was Dave Hare, I think it was car owners, Al Hamilton.
Oh,
I think Ray Tilley was there. And I'm trying to remember, there may have been someone else, but yeah, so that's been my role, helping out with roundtables throughout the course of the season. And man, just the people I've had the opportunity to meet and the stories that these folks tell, it's just been such a blast. And I don't care if it's Steve Kinzer, or if it's a driver from the super sportsman ranks that no one outside of central Pennsylvania has ever heard of. We have not had a bad roundtable. They are so entertaining, so refreshing, just so fun. Um, it's been a real blessing, a real gift to be able to be part of that.
you have a sense of history. I know history is a big part of what you do, not only at the museum, but I even when you're talking at the track on the mic.
Hmm.
What is it about the history of this sport that you really gravitate to? Is it just because you've seen a lot of that, or what's kind of your thought process with embracing that history as much
Yeah.
as you do?
Um, History is something that's always been of interest to me, whether it's motorsports or social and cultural history. I was actually in a history minor in college. Um, and I think it's just being able to connect the dots, Jeremy, the past and the present. You look at a driver now, and you just pick any driver, and people will say, well, he or she is this the greatest? Nobody's ever done this. Well, maybe, but there's a pretty good chance somebody has done it. And I think it's important to recognize that. I think it's important to recognize the people that were the groundbreakers before us. Um, and I think it's helpful to add perspective to maybe not only an event, but the sport in general. You know, where we've been and how far we've come, and who are the people that have gotten us here. I think it's important to recognize those things.
One person who has been part of Central Pennsylvania history, we lost him recently, was Lynn Paxton.
Yeah.
He's the guy who brought you into EMMR.
Yep.
How difficult was that for you? What did he mean, not only to this area as a racer, but what
Yeah.
he did after he stepped outside the cockpit?
Oh my goodness. You know, hmm. Lynn was boy, his passion was that museum. I mean, that was his dream, and he made it happen. And for folks that have not visited the Eastern Museum of Motor Racing, I can talk about it, but it won't do it justice. You know, it's one of those things you really have to come experience. And to see how this has grown over the years, through the wonderful volunteers, through the board that has done some really nice work, the board of directors. Um, Lynn, there've been a lot of tributes, Jeremy, to Lynn, and I think they've all been wonderful. People have said, Lynn has meant this to me. He's meant that to me. He did this for me, just from all over the country. But the one that I think rang just so true, Pat Sullivan on Facebook posted 3 words: an incalculable loss. That's all he said.
Hmm.
And I went, wow, that that was it. Because Lynn loved the sport. He was 39 when he walked away after winning the National Open, the Williams Grove National Open, for the second time. But he had other interests, old cars. He had a collection of old cars. I think he had a 34. I hope I get this right. I think he had a 34 Ford that he had in high school, flathead car. And he would go up to Hershey every year, up to the AACA fall meet, biggest in the country, biggest in the world, actually. And there were times when he'd be late for qualifying at Syracuse because Syracuse happened the same week as Hershey. And he would go to Hershey first, and he loved his family. They adored him. And he was just, he was a force. But the thing that it took me a while to understand, Jeremy, was, I like to be prepared. You can't be prepared when you're working with Paxton. He would just spring things on you out of the blue, right? He was good energy like that. And so we'd be doing a roundtable, and early on he'd sit up front with me, and support and help steer things. And let's say we're interviewing a driver, and he looks out into the audience and he sees maybe a former crew member or another driver that used to race against this person, and all of a sudden he's got him up front with us. I've got no opportunity to prepare. I don't even know who this person is. At that point, I let go of the reins. Paxton's running the show. And I'll never forget, we're sitting up front when a situation like this occurred. And the person that he had just called up front started telling a story and was really getting into it. And Lynn turned and looked at me and just smiled. And I went, oh, okay, now I get it. Lynn Paxton understood that when racers are no longer in the spotlight, they can lose their connection with their community. And EMMR is an opportunity. I'm sorry, man.
No, it's okay.
It's an opportunity to pull them back into the fold. And that was the beauty of Paxton.
Obviously, it's a tough loss for you, as we can hear. When were you able to see him
Mm-hmm.
at, in those closing days? and tell him how much he meant to you and the racing world?
I didn't see him. I'm trying to think, probably the last couple months, I'd catch him up at the museum because he would still come in, even when he wasn't feeling well. Man, he was going through a lot, and he would still come in because that was his energy. He fed off of that. Um, Lynn, I have to laugh because, his son Brett and even Allison Kreitzer, the executive director up at the Eastern Museum, they were both joking the other week about Lynn giving compliments. There was an event where there were, I don't know how many Boy Scouts came into the museum several weeks ago, and it was a couple months back now, I guess. And Allison and Kelly Devilbiss were there, and they were taking the students, the Boy Scouts, through the museum and interacting with them and so forth. And apparently things went well. And at the end of the day, Paxton, I got to laugh. He said to Allison, "Wow, there's a lot of people here today." And Allison goes, "Wait a minute, was that a compliment?" That's the way Lynn was. He wasn't always touchy feely, but he had his way of letting you know that he cared, and that he saw the positive in things. And so there wasn't a lot of hugging going on, but it was one of those situations where whenever I had the opportunity, I'd let him know that he was well loved, and he felt that, he knew that. He's got a wonderful family, and he's not only does family adore him, but just his friends as well. Yeah, just a huge loss, but yeah, what a great guy.
Yes, he will definitely be missed. Kind of shifting gears here.
Yeah.
The season's winding down, except
Hmm.
at BAPS, because we're racing until November.
Yeah.
So, but that
Yeah.
being said,
Yeah.
off season. What's your off season look like? Do you just not want to talk to anybody because you talk every week? I mean, do you follow stuff, or do you just kind of shut it down for a while? What does your off season look like? Because, obviously High Limit finished up,
Yeah.
and I think those guys are going to scatter a little bit
Yeah.
and maybe go on vacation. I know now they do it for a living. Obviously, you have a job, a regular
Yep.
job, day job.
Yep.
And, but do you kind of just turn everything off for at least, I don't know, 2, 3 weeks and not talk to anyone?
Um, I try and find a balance in things. During the season, as much as I love it, by the time August rolls around, usually I'm like, we could end the season here. I'm okay with that.
I'm the
You
same
know,
way.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I have other interests. It inevitably, like the last week of the season, someone will say to me, "There's no racing next week. I don't know what I'm going to do." I'm like, "Really?" Because I got a list about half a mile long of things I'm going to be doing. Um, yeah, so I catch up on things that I might not have as much time to do during the racing season. I like to do some cycling, bicycling, and I have some cool weather clothes, so I can do that some. I enjoy visiting wineries, so it's maybe not ideal during the winter, but there are places I like to go there, and car museums. If there's one thing I like more than racing, it's old cars, classic cars, antiques, but there's plenty to do. I've got a granddaughter who's a sophomore in high school, and she plays Girls Academy League soccer, so she travels all over. And so, I get the chance to catch some of her matches, and grandson that plays basketball, and I got son and daughter-in-law that live down in Falls Church, Virginia. So, a little bit more time maybe to even visit there if possible. So there's plenty to do, but the off season, it's almost a misnomer, because we finish up the 16th of November. November 17th, I've got a roundtable with Danny Dietrich at EMMR.
Oh, that should be fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then there's normally like an open house at EMMR in early December. January, the banquets start. I help out at the Arch Banquet, Auto Racing Club of Hagerstown. And then beginning of February is Racing Extravaganza. So that's a
Yeah.
2 day show that I work with the roundtables and interviews there. And then like 2 or 3 weeks later, Lincoln's open. So there's not a lot of time. And it's nice to have a bit of a break, but when Dirt Vision starts or streaming their shows from Florida, I'm watching. I'm ready at that point. I'm like some guys, Jeremy, they can't go to the track if they're not announcing, or some racers can't go if they're not racing. I'm fine sitting in the stands watching. Um, I just love the dance. Love the dance. It just that's something. There's a couple things in life that just never get old with me, and hearing a car fire off, and even just watching them idle before they get cranked up for hot laps. There's just been something magical about that for me since I've been a kid. So yeah, August, I might be ready for the season to end, but when it's game on again, I'm in.
So obviously I'm a reporter and I have opinions on pretty much everything. So,
Sure.
so, but you're in a unique situation. I'm sure you have opinions, but you can't let them go onto the mic.
Yeah.
I get asked all the time, you know, do you ever interview people you don't like? And I'm like, well, sure.
Right.
Whether I was covering the NFL or covering something else, there's always people you gravitate to and people you don't. How difficult is it to keep that separation? I know for me, it's not that hard because,
Yeah.
when I was at the newspaper, that's one of the first things you learn. For you specifically,
Yeah.
how difficult is it to just your play by play, stories, history, so on and so, but never get into that crossing the line of opinion?
Yeah. I don't find it difficult because I see my role um, similar to yours as basically as a reporter, except I'm just reporting what you're seeing and I'm trying to support what's happening on the track. Um, and then, there's a lot of things. I feel like I'm the last guy to hear anything. I'll show up at the track and somebody will say, "Hey, did you hear about so and so?" I'm like, "Nope, I have no idea what you're talking about." Um, so I don't find that to be a real challenge. I think there's so much to talk about, so much to celebrate, aside from those things that might draw our opinions. And I make it a point just to stick to that because one of the other things that I try and keep in mind, Jeremy, as a track announcer, is when you come to the speedway on any given show, any given week. I mean, you look around and there's people from all walks, and you don't know what they're going through. But on any given week, you might find somebody who just lost their job, somebody who's dealing with an illness, somebody who just lost a parent, a spouse. I mean, you don't know what's going on. And so for those several hours that we're at the track, I try and make that an oasis where people can forget about their problems and help create an environment where they're a little bit, they're carefree for a bit, and can just enjoy what's going on in front of them and sort of forget about their concerns for a while. And if I bring opinions into it, or if I'm stirring up conflict, that's not really promoting that type of environment.
So obviously, when you watch Dirt Vision, you watch Flow, or you're at the track even. Do
Yeah.
you listen to other announcers and kind of, I don't know, learn what to do, maybe something you like and incorporate it, or what not to do that's something you don't like? Do you listen to the announcer? Do you like I can't watch a football game without thinking about what I would write if I was covering it. I just can't. I
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
really watch any sport and I just accept it now. It used to bother me, but now I just accept it. So
Yeah.
you going to a race or listening to a race,
Yep.
do you, I don't want to say grade the announcer, but do you kind of listen to them
Sure.
and kind of take something away, whether it's to do something or not to do something?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the growth process, regardless of how long you've been doing something. Um, there's always the opportunity to pick up new ideas, to come away with something fresh that you know. I think it's easy for a lot of us to fall into this routine and pattern, and that can be good to a degree, but sometimes the things that are part of our routine and pattern may not be as healthy as we think they are. And so if you listen to others and you find a fresh way of making a particular call or referencing a part of the track or whatever the case is, if you find that it works, then that's, that's a new direction to move in, and I think helps the program. So yeah, for sure, I think it's it's healthy to be able to listen and pick up new ideas. Yeah, certainly.
Is it nerve-wracking when you're trying to incorporate something new? Like you have a couple phrases. I know Mike Mallet loves them. There's a couple, you're got him. He likes that.
Yeah.
And is it nervous? Are you a little nervous when you add something new because wow, are people going to like this?
Not really, because most of the time it's just spontaneous. And
Okay.
then, somebody will say, "Hey, I really like that." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, maybe we'll work that back in." But um no, I think the key for me is not to think about it too much. If it happens, it happens, and it works. Great. I'm going to reference Pat Sullivan again. Patrick has been, he's a good friend, and he subscribes to the school of thought that as an announcer, we need to always remember that the show is on the track. And it's our job to support that and not get in the way of it. And so, if you bring some color to the program, I think people embrace that for the most part. But I think there's also a line we can cross, where, as an announcer, if you become the show or part of the show, maybe it's time to dial it back just a little bit and make sure that we stay out of the way and that we're in a support role. But yeah, as far as catchphrases and such, the stuff that I've done, and I think they're minimal, but it's just been spontaneous. Something happened, I said something, and it seemed to flow and seemed to work and be accepted. So we work it back in. But yeah, when Mallet's at the track, we make sure that we get a couple extra got 'ems in there. He's a
He
good
loves
kid.
it. He loves it.
Yeah, he
And
can't
and
help
he will be there in November, so he'll be all happy.
it. All right,
Is
we'll be rolling.
is there do you ever do you ever listen to your broadcast? Like I know for pay-per-view, do you ever go back and listen and go, "Ooh, I maybe shouldn't
Yeah,
have done that," or
yeah.
is it something you study?
Most of the time, I'll check out, at BAPS Sprint Car Unlimited.tv, and when you post them on YouTube or on Facebook, I'll go back and listen. And I'm like, okay, that worked. No, what were you thinking? That's didn't sound nearly as good as it did in your head, type of thing. Yeah, but it all comes back to that approach to trying to support what's happening on the track, not getting in the way. And whether that's through energy, a lack of energy on the mic, whatever. Yeah, it's important to go back and to listen and sort of do a little self-critique and try to be better at your craft again for your audience.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yes, sir.
Most embarrassing moment in your career on the mic.
Oh,
Maybe you did something wrong and
yeah,
you
yeah.
just
The one that comes to mind, and I say the one because I'm sure there are others, but this comes to mind because it was really early on up at Williams Grove. Now, again, I mentioned I didn't know, I'd never been to Silver Spring, right? Uh,
yeah.
so I didn't know any of the sportsman drivers, late model drivers, street stock drivers. So, say for instance, the first night I remember late models are coming out for hot laps. I'm up in the booth and I'm like, I have no roster. I have nothing from the track. I don't know who these people are. Kurt Smith was race director, and he said, "Oh, that's Travis Meese in car 116. He's from Harrisburg." So I flipped the mic on, and Travis Meese in the 116 racing out of Harrisburg. Turned the mic off. I'm like, now what? So it was that type of green. I was that green with it, with the divisions, and so it's early on, and there was an accident up in turn 4, and I can still see it. I don't remember who the driver was, but they had the tow truck comes up and they hook up to him. They're going to take him back to the pit area. And of course, tow truck can be the wrecker. It can be the hook. And so I said, opened the mic and said, well, 7 car on the back of the hooker, headed back to the pit area.
Oh,
And I closed the mic, and then it replayed in my head. And I looked down the booth to my left to the race director and all the scorers. And I said, did I just say hooker? And all their heads just turned and looked at me. And I'm like, okay. So I opened the mic back up and said, well, maybe it was a tow truck. I'm like, you got to roll with it. You
yeah,
can't
at that
laugh
point.
at yourself.
Yeah, at that point, you're committed.
Oh yeah, I'm in. I'm in neck deep at that point. So whatever. But yeah, that's the one that comes to mind. There's always times where maybe you don't say what you think you said, the wrong word just happens to come out. Whether it's switch up the last name of a driver who has the same first name as another, or the wrong car number. I mean, things happen. But I always told my kids growing up, I'm like, look, you're gonna make mistakes. It's all in the recovery. But yeah, that's the one. That's the one that I remember that I'll never forget.
That's a pretty good
a
one.
7 car on the back of the hooker.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
So you have a day job.
Yeah.
I think you work. Is it you're involved in a
yeah?
FIA?
I work for the Social Security Administration.
Social Security Administration.
Yep.
So if a national series came a calling,
yeah,
would you do it?
I've talked to people. I've had friends and family ask me that because I did really enjoy the time out on the road with SCN radio. Aside from being apart from my family, but now my children are grown. I'm no longer married. I'm hoping to retire from Social Security in the next 2 or 3 years.
Look at you.
Yeah, how about that? So, if opportunities were there, it would be a good time to consider it. I do like the travel. I do like the racing. I do like the people. But I don't know. We'll have to see what things look like in 2 or 3 years. The other thing is, as an announcer, it's like, am I relevant? Because there's times now, Jeremy, that I'm standing trackside interviewing a race winner who is the same age, a year older, maybe a year younger than my oldest grandchild. So you try, and as an announcer, I think you need to be relevant and stay in touch with the people, and I think being around young people helps us stay young, in spirit, and I think that's helpful. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. 2 or 3 years is not a long time, but at the same time, in the racing world, a lot can happen in 2 or 3 years. So who knows what's going to be available? Who knows what's not going to be available? Who knows if I'm still relevant at that point? But it would be worth considering.
You're the best in Central Pennsylvania. You're relevant. Trust me.
You're generous with your assessment.
Oh, no. You know me long enough now that I'm pretty honest, if nothing else. So I know that kind of rubs people the wrong way sometimes, but it's too bad. Because I just don't care.
Yeah.
But you said about travel. You go to Knoxville every year for the Hall of Fame induction.
Hall of Fame weekend, yeah.
That's something that is really important to you. When did you start doing that, and why?
Yeah. So when I was on the road with the Sprint Car Network, again, this was 2001. I think we had 3 stops at Knoxville that year, including the Nationals, and loved it. I love the Midwest. I love big open spaces. I love the people out in the Midwest. It's so laid back. There's a thing, Iowa nice. Well, it's real.
It is real.
Yeah. And I just enjoy the Midwest. So I've been wanting to get back to Knoxville for years, and I just never made it happen. And then I was talking to Paxton up at EMMR handful of years ago, and he said, there might be an opportunity for Lance to be inducted this coming year. I went, I said, you know what? If Lance is going to be inducted, I'm going out. I want to see this, and I'll miss a race at BAPS. And that was always the thing, I feel like if you make a commitment, you should be there. So
Mhm.
I didn't want to miss the race, but I said, I'm going to go out. So I did. And oh my goodness, what an incredible weekend. The Nationals are one thing, and I might get back to the Nationals eventually, but the truth is, I don't like crowds. So Hall of Fame weekend is like perfect for me because I like the regular program out of Knoxville. They do a nice job. I know enough of the racers; it makes it really interesting. Um, but the people, I keep coming back to this, Jeremy. But the people that I've had the opportunity to meet, and so the Bill Wright and Bob Baker at the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame have been kind enough to ask me to help moderate a bench racing session on Friday nights out there, and that was just a blast. And again, just the people I've had the chance to meet and the stories that have been told and the laughter and the camaraderie, it's just super special. Yeah, that's a weekend that now I just I won't miss. And then of course there was I'm trying to remember, was it 19? Dave Argabright and he and Pat Sullivan
Yep.
do the induction ceremony, and Dave had another commitment, and so Pat had asked me to join him, and that was the year I had the opportunity to do the induction for Stevie Smith. And so I remember sitting in the grandstands at Lincoln Speedway when Stevie Smith was a rookie, bouncing
So
the 119 off the wall in turns 1 and 2, not on purpose. But you look at how far this guy had come and you look at his stats, and it's nice to be able to be there to celebrate with them and to see what it means to the inductees. It's really special.
I thought he should have been a first ballot guy. I was
Stevie
disappointed.
is Stevie's quiet, and his career was quiet. And but when you look at the career, it speaks to you,
Yep.
to your point, and you're like, wow, he did all that. Like, yeah, he did all that. So yeah, it's a great weekend, and I look forward to it. I go out early, just so I've got time to enjoy the area. I stay in Pella. I love Pella. There's some restaurants out there I like. There's a winery, between Pella and Oskaloosa. I hit every year, and I just enjoy it out there so much. It's a real highlight for me.
Yeah, I know when I go out for the Nationals, Brent Smith and I, my photographer,
Yeah,
we like we did a thing this year where we're close to the track now,
yeah.
and I cook. So we don't go
Okay.
out a
Yep.
ton, but there's
Yep.
some places in Pella, really nice town. There's a restaurant we went to, I believe, over there that was really nice. So I can understand where or why you like that area. So, I
Yeah.
mean, have you been to Eldora?
Yeah. But again, not since 2001. I was there. I called the race the night that PJ Chesson won
Ah,
the historical big one, and he stayed in the same hotel as we did that night. And what I remember, there were a couple things about that night that I remember. Um, One was just the excitement of him holding on because PJ was just like a loose cannon, and you know
yeah.
you kept waiting for him to mess up, honestly, and he never did.
Nope.
And he wins this big race, this big celebration on the front stretch, goes back to the hauler. They were the last hauler to leave the pit area because they were celebrating, went back to the hotel and realized at that point that he had failed to pick up his payout. That's how excited he was. But yeah, I haven't been there again since 2001. I've got to get back out and see all the changes. The racing's fantastic. Eldora's Eldora,
Oh,
just stupid fast. And yeah, it's wow. You see these guys buzzing the wall, and you're like, really? How do you even convince yourself that this is a good idea? But yeah, special
it's
place.
it is. I know for me it is because I went there in '87 with my father, and I Now they don't buzz the wall as much as they used to, but the
Mhm.
racing was like this year for Kings Royal Week was exceptional. So,
Yeah.
but it seems like you like to get out to other tracks.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was with the Sprint Car Network, we traveled from, Fargo, North Dakota, all the way down to Baytown, Texas, outside of Houston, tracks in between, Magnolia, Mississippi. Um, yeah, so I enjoy just seeing other facilities, seeing other racers, other divisions for that matter. Just enjoy the racing. And it's nice to see how things are done elsewhere. Um, yeah, there's just so many out there, and it's a great opportunity, I think, just to expand your racing horizons a little bit, even if it's the same type of race car, be it sprint cars, late models, whatever. I just There's something exciting about going to a new track.
Well, Dave, since you were 9 months old until now, I think you've expanded your racing horizons a lot, and
Yeah, I
uh,
think so.
and you've done a great job announcing. I enjoy listening to you. I'm also appreciate you coming on the deep dive. You're a guy I wanted to get on, and I had some people who wanted me to have you on. So I'm glad we were able to make time for this. And again, I appreciate it.
No, thank you. I appreciate the good word. I appreciate the support. Again, the racing thing it's been a lot of fun, but you just meet so many fantastic people. Just really, really pleased to be part of the racing community and grateful for the support I've received. So thanks for having me. Keep up the great work. I enjoy your program, and whether it's deep dive or 90 at 9 or the website, just fantastic work. And I'm glad you're filling that niche in the market for the sprint car world, man.
Well, I appreciate that, and I will see you next week where I'll be producing. You won't have Mallet, but you'll get him on. You'll get Mike Mallet on the 16th.
Gotcha. Well, looking forward to it, brother. I'll see you then.
All right, take care.
Yeah, man.
That wraps up another edition of the SprintCarLimited.com deep dive presented by Dottie's Family Market in Dover, PA. They have a lot of good stuff there. Check them out. Thank you to Dave Hare for joining us on the show. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel and also check out our daily exclusive content at www.sprintcarlimited.com. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Deep Dive.